The Those two excerpts show such an extraordinary range of artistry, from singing a Mozart aria in the first one to singing an excerpt from Dr. Atomic, which was Eric Owens' Metropolitan Opera debut. He's since, of course, gone on to sing so much more at the Met. But this wonderful range as an artist, as an actor, is an area we want to explore tonight. Our conversation series with important artists who are established in the field of opera, the conversations have a certain professional development slant to them. We want to hear about career development and development of one's artistry over the course of decades of work. So as we archive it on our YouTube channel, it becomes a learning resource for many of the young artists who go to Opera America to learn about advancing their own careers. But now that the screen is all the way up and we've seen two excerpts, let me introduce the man himself, our good friend Eric Owens. Eric. Welcome, welcome. Thanks. So good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Please have a seat.
Thank you. Thank
You are a much beloved artist around the world, and especially here in New York, so it's wonderful to hear the applause greet you.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation all season long. I wanted to start, and I have a number of topics to go over with you, but I wanted to start with your early musical training.
Sure.
Because it was really interesting to read that you started as an oboist.
I actually started piano at the age of 6. I was made to take piano lessons. And then before the oboe, I played clarinet for a year in junior high school. And I was in the back of the clarinet section in the band, and then I couldn't play in the orchestra because there were older kids ahead of me, and so the next year the guy who played the oboe left. He graduated and went on to high school, and I thought to myself, there's only one oboe here to be had. And if I switched to the oboe, I could play first all the time. And I would be in the orchestra. And that's what I did.
But you were apparently good at it. I mean, you studied.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
really
I was pretty decent at it. I studied with a wonderful oboist and English horn player, Louis Rosenblatt. He was in the Philadelphia Orchestra. He passed away a few years ago. Just an amazing human being and just wonderful man. And I thought that's what I was going to do as a profession. But I saw more career potential in being an opera singer.
Well, and lo and behold, you're right.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have a major job.
As I read the material, you listened to opera as a young person. You liked
opera.
I
was an opera
really
fan by age 9 or 10, listening to it on the radio. A wonderful teacher named Eleanor Alter would give me opera recordings and LPs. LPs are these round things. No. And for you youngsters. And one of the first ones she gave me was Der Freischütz, of all things, of von Weber. And I wore that out. I just thought it was awesome. And then Don Giovanni and I loved, and not at all thinking that it would be a profession.
So did you just wait until the end of puberty and found that you had this resonant voice? And what led you to think, well, maybe I can sing?
I sang in my high school choir, and the choir director, this wonderful man named Italo Taranta, he gave me a few solos every once in a while, and he told me, you might consider taking some voice lessons. And I remember one of the first solos, we went to this mall at Christmas time and we sang excerpts from Messiah. And so I sang, "Thus saith the Lord, and but who may abide." And I remember my knee shaking violently just from nerves. I was just sort of, early on it was this new thing. But as I performed more and more, the knee stopped shaking.
So when you went to Temple,
yeah,
meaning to Temple University.
Temple University, not but
when you went to Temple University, Did you enter as a singer, or did you enter as an oboist?
I entered as a singer, but I was still taking oboe lessons, and I was playing oboe in the Philadelphia Youth Orchestra, and actually during that time met some wonderful people who've gone on to. Pavel Yervi was the assistant conductor there one year, and Bob Spano was the assistant conductor of the Philadelphia Youth Orchestra, and Miguel Harth Bedoya, all these guys who've gone on to wonderful things. And but I did them both for a while, and singing just took over, and I loved doing it.
Now, I had dinner a couple of weeks ago with Mika Karas, who is covering in the Ring Cycle at the Met right now. Mm-hmm. And he told me that for the last several years, he's not studied with a voice teacher, but he's studied with a flute teacher because he wants to learn about some of the breathing techniques that a flautist uses to be able to sustain those long phrases.
Right.
Do you draw on your training as an oboist at all? Do you think about breath or phrasing through the lens of your early musical training as an oboist?
Oboe is quite different from singing and from flute. Yeah. And with oboe, you're not getting rid of enough air. And so sometimes before you take a breath, you have to exhale. And then so you don't start getting bad air built up. And so it's not that similar breathing-wise, but having played in orchestras and chamber music, I think just having a relationship with a conductor, that there's some sort of reciprocity, just sort of knowing that kind of relationship from the orchestra. Learning how to watch, learning how to follow, learning how to dance a little bit, that, you know, like, you're leading and he's following, or he's leading, you're following, and it's just sort of this thing that's a little different when you get up onto the stage and out of the pit, and and you find out it's just as important to hear the orchestra as it is to see the conductor, because your idea of what with the conductor is and the orchestra's idea of what with the conductor is needs to be the same. And so if they're hanging out on the back end of the beat, you need to accordingly just play chamber music, big chamber music.
And chamber music and listening, I'll come back to the word listening, because that's really important to you as a musician,
Absolutely.
as an artist, I know.
I'm always, it's just, if I can't hear the orchestra,
and listening to
deadly.
other characters, too.
Absolutely.
So we'll get there. In one of the interviews that I read with you, or that I listened to, you talk about the fact that you started out as a bass and really had to build your upper voice, really had to learn how to sing your top notes. And you use the phrase, it took a lot to build a voice until your upper voice was stable.
Yeah.
And I never heard the word stability used to describe an upper voice. And what do you go through? And I think those of us who are not singers think that, oh, you have this glorious sound, just listen to you speak, all you have to learn how to do is sustain your speaking voice. Right. But you actually worked for a long time to build, how did you do that, a top voice that was stable. And what does that mean?
Stable and consistent may have been a better word. That you're not just sort of, having your fingers crossed like, I hope this comes out, kind of a thing. Because that's, and it just, I studied with Armin Boyajian, who meticulously, just note by note, I think it was almost a year and a half to 2 years before we did any repertoire. We just did vocalises and exercises and finding the default perfect position for an E vowel on this note, an A vowel on this note, an A vowel, and then adding consonants to those vowels, and not allowing the consonants to drag the vowel somewhere where you don't want it to be placed. And adding 2 consonants, an ST, and then 3 consonant STR before, and just, and on every note, and with a mirror, and and with support and just building the technical foundation for, and for roles that have come along here lately.
Right, right.
And
I think that go ahead.
I always had a range that was wide, but I didn't have a tessitura. And so stamina was a big part of it, and that just comes from a lot of support here and a lot of freedom up here.
And did it become automatic finally, so that once you developed the muscle memory and the stamina to have a tessitura that allowed you to be comfortable in roles that were higher, or do you still think about it?
From time to time, I still have to think about it. If it's something that's new that I'm working on, I'm sort of thinking about it and what it means. Also, you tend to have to think about it when things aren't going all that well with you physically. You might be catching something, and you're not feeling bad enough to cancel, but you're not at your best. And so I think during your warming up exercises, you sort of have to figure out where's the voice kind of lying the best way so I can get around that phlegm that's hanging out, or where in the placement is it, working because I'm stuffy, and so you have to find the root of least resistance in your resonators, and you kind of have to figure that out, and then ultimately go with what that feels like, and when you get out there, you can't really go with what it sounds like. I mean, last year during part of the ring, I was deaf in this ear because my eardrum had burst. And so not being able to hear, there were a couple of performances or even a couple of rehearsals. I remember during the rehearsal, the prompter was, it was this ear, and she was saying something to me, and I had no idea. And the way I was hearing myself was so foreign, but I had to really go with what it felt like and not try to sort of push my voice to where it sounded like it should, because it wasn't going to.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I think people listen to you speak, and they think that singing has to be the most natural thing to you, given this glorious speaking voice that you have. And yet all of this work to construct a voice that had the range, that always sounded like you. You said in one, because you can have high notes, but they may sound like someone else is singing.
Yeah, it has to be, even when they talk about being even from top to bottom. And also, yeah, it takes a lot of work for it to sound that natural. It just, you have to, you get in the practice room and you've done the due diligence, and you've worked and you've worked and you've worked. And to a point where you were talking before, where you just sort of get out there and you let go, and it just, muscle memory takes over and it happens. But especially with the repertoire I'm moving into, I think it's all about not feeling like you're, driving this big truck. When I'm up there singing, I'm not having the sense that, oh wow, this is a huge sound. I'm up there singing Wagner the same way I'm going to sing Mozart. And I think if you start to try to make something happen instead of letting it happen, you can get into trouble. And it just has to, and trying to color the voice and manufacture something. I think you may feel within yourself that, wow, making a whole lot of sound, but it's probably not carrying all that well.
And it's just amazing for a singer that you never stop studying. You never because even your body changes as you get older, and you're
Absolutely.
adjusting to a different physique.
And you never sort of stop thinking, okay, do I really know what I'm doing? You're always sort of like, okay, it's like every 6 months. I'm sure both singers have this thing. It's like, okay, I sang this rehearsal yesterday. Finally, I know what I'm doing. And then, months later, it's like, oh, I didn't really know what I was doing. Now, it's just, we're all a little crazy, and we go just,
Well, those with real integrity, I think.
we just.
But then, so you're such a man of music, piano, clarinet, oboe, voice, and then I heard that you are studying conducting.
Yeah.
Because you...
You need an exit strategy.
When
the voice starts doing this, you can just add the other hand and just... No, I'm just kidding. No, but
are you good at it?
See, if I said yes, then it was like, oh, listen to him. I'm working on it, and I'm becoming more confident.
Does it inform the way you study your own music vocally? Or
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're aware of points in the score, especially in opera, where okay, here I have to help the conductor out. I can't just sort of just go. He's got to bring the orchestra in right here because they've been out for a while, and I need to sort of be a good colleague and set him up well, and just being aware of the music as a whole, and not just soloist accompaniment. No, it's this big collective, this one. You hear people talk about orchestra being an instrument. Well, you add those voices, and you're a part of that whole instrument. And I think it serves you well to think in those terms, especially music like Strauss and Janacek and music where if the singing stopped, you'd have this amazing orchestral piece.
Right. Right. Your enthusiasm is a word that comes up in so many of the interviews. In Opera News magazine, it said, Owens is nearly as avid an opera goer as he is a singer. When he's not on stage most nights, he can be found in the audience of the company or local orchestra he's performing with. In another interview, when you were upstate at Glimmerglass last summer, it said when he's at the Met, he'll find time to duck into rehearsals of other productions. You're quoted as saying, I'm like a kid at the candy store. And I have one personal experience. You were singing Lodovico at Carnegie Hall with Muti and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, this amazing performance. And I was in a row on the main floor, and for the first act and the second act at the end of the row was Eric. And I finally passed him at the second intermission. I said, aren't you supposed to be up there? And he looked at me and said, I wouldn't miss this for the world, because he was an audience member.
I would have been there if I hadn't been in the show. So I just thought, well, I don't sing for the first couple of acts.
And there you were sitting in the auditorium.
Absolutely.
But I just loved that statement that you weren't someone who's going to be, backstage just sort of, hanging out, but you love the art form so much, you love music making so much that you were out in the audience.
And that was a great performance. I mean, Muti was on fire. He was just, it was
a really good performance.
It was awesome.
How do you sustain this enthusiasm? Because, the world is filled with people who become a little bit cynical about what they do or tired of the routine. How do you maintain this enthusiasm for what you do?
It's almost like oxygen. Just music has been a huge part of my life for so long, and a friend of sorts. That's there with any emotional support you need. There's nothing like music to pull you out of anything or to take you somewhere. And you close your eyes and you're off. And even though I do it for a living, I'll say, like, I think Ben Heppner said this, I sing for free. They pay me to deal with all the other crap that comes along with the career, you know, like flying everywhere and lost luggage and the paychecks for for all of that.
In another part of an interview, you spoke about, and I was going to ask you this later, you spoke about the toll of the career success, that you are in a hotel, you miss family and friends, you miss holidays and birthdays, you are creating great music and you have colleagues wherever you go. And is that musical through line what propels you? Do you do needlepoint? And what do you do to keep your body and soul together when you're in a hotel as much as you are?
You learn what it is you need to take with you, and what, you know, and I used to take a whole bunch of stuff too big, you know, now it's all about taking as little as possible. But you learn what it is that's going to make you comfortable. You know, books and music, and we have these inventions now that you can have your whole CD library in the palm of your hand, or your whole bookcase in the palm of your hand. You know, I mean, with that said, I do miss Tower Records, but
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
you know, at Barnes and Noble. You know, but you and what do you do when, what you said, what do you do when the music making is not fulfilling? What if your colleagues aren't, you know, those moments are the toughest moments, where the thing that's supposed to be why you're here, it's not going well because of, you know, someone, the conductor's being an ass, or, you know, your colleagues are
joining him in that activity.
Right, and you're just like, you know, and then it turns into one of those just give me my money jobs, and I hate those. I hate, and then you can feel it like early on in the rehearsal period if it's going to be one of those gigs or not, and you're just like, oh God.
With your integrity and with your musicianship and enthusiasm, are you able to sometimes turn those situations around? Do you try to take responsibility for the group dynamic in a production?
Sometimes, and sometimes it may work, and then sometimes you're beating your head against the wall, and then you just sort of stop, and you just sort of fulfill your contractual obligation,
And
to, which is terrible, and luckily that doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen often.
Acting. You say
Genius! No, I'm just kidding.
And this is
Master thespian.
this was part of the of something that you said when you were going from being a musician oboist to being a musician singer. I enjoy the process of being a character, and actually that aspect of it came much later, in my late 20s. That's when I started trying to be the best actor I could be on stage, and started trying to figure out what it meant. It's being a really good listener, you said. Why is listening at the core of being a good actor for you?
Because then what you do is not coming out of nowhere, right? It's a reaction to something. Or if you're on stage alone, we need to see the thought process, you know, of not, okay, the director told me to go over here, so I'm gonna go over here now and sing a little bit. You know, no, it's like something takes you over there, takes your focus over there, and then takes you over there, something in the text, and sometimes you're having to figure out what that is. And as you rehearse again and again, for me, the process is just rehearsing. You start to take in different things, and it develops over this rehearsal period. And for me, I need the entire rehearsal period for that to develop. Some people are just right there, day one, and it's sort of performance ready. And I'm not that kind of.
Do you rehearse alone? Do you work on things by yourself sometimes about, you know, what is it that will take me over to that spot?
Sure. Also, just reading through the libretto and listening to the music. Sometimes you'll get a most times you'll get a lot of subtext in the music,
Yeah.
or, because if you're on a stage, I mean, the orchestra is you. You're not reacting to what's happening in the orchestra, you're creating what's happening in the orchestra. The situation is creating what's happening in the orchestra. And you find your music somewhere, and then it's someone else's music, and it might even be someone else's music while you're singing alone. And you start to sort of delve into what all that means, and it's this amazing, wonderful gift as operatic artists, that we have this wonderful other character. And
Playing right over there.
That's in the orchestra, and or that this extension of you, or your thoughts, and also really trying to make the text your own in a way that it's not that you don't have, because in straight theater the text is yours, plain and simple. I mean, you are the interpreter. You control how long you say a certain sentence. But in opera, the composer has chosen for you that your voice is going to go high on these particular words, and on this word is the climax, so you don't have that choice, and you're interpreting an interpretation. It's already sort of laid out. But within that, you can find things that you can make your own without sort of, grinding the show to a halt, and and the conductor's moved on, is like, but damn it, I want to sing this note some more, or to say this word some more, more accurately as a performer.
How do you prepare a new role? Do you start with the libretto and reading the text? Do you start musically? Do you start dramatically? What portal do you go through?
I usually start with the libretto, and as I'm more so in the last several years, as I read through libretto, I'm thinking of it like an actor. And once upon a time, I always started with the music, and as I'm reading the libretto, I'm like, he says that, and it makes me say this, and here's the pivotal word that's going to define this whole little exchange, and you start seeing it as a dry script, and then, because that's how the composer saw it, and then I get the score, and I'll listen to some recordings, and but I'll sit down at the piano.
Because you're a pianist, so
I wouldn't call myself a pianist. I play piano. Because sometimes, and when I'm just like, oh goodness, to the recording.
So you do listen. You do listen
to the recording, Robin.
You do listen to recordings, but not necessarily of Grendel or Dr. Atomic, because you don't always have recordings.
Right.
But for the 19th, 20th century repertoire that exists, you'll listen to a recording.
And several, so you don't, because we're parrots. I mean, we just sort of, and so I'll try not to listen to one recording over and over and over.
Will you work with a coach accompanist, a language coach?
If they're available, but if you're on the road most of the time, and either there's no coach around, or you're in an orchestra gig where you have to sort of do it on your own, and a voice teacher's job and a coach's job ultimately is to make themselves unnecessary, and to have the student be self-sufficient when they go off and on these planes and away from, I've heard of people having lessons on Skype and all that sort of thing, but I don't know how realistic that is when you're dealing with time differences. It's like, what time is it there? Why have you called me? That's what time it is. Click.
I loved, and this really fit with a conversation that I had a couple of weeks ago with Julius Rudel. Julius Rudel has a new memoir that's out, and for the book launch we had him here, but I interviewed Diana Soviero, Spiro Malos, and Frank Corsaro. And we were talking about the old days of City Opera when it was really a company, and where Norman Traegle would sing a leading role on one night and Colline on another night, and everyone is performing large and small roles. And just recently you did Sharpless in Butterfly in Los Angeles, and then did a small role in Cabaret dei Montecchi at San Francisco Opera. And I was wondering about, not that you're going to have much opportunity to do small roles anymore, but do you enjoy doing them, and do they serve an artistic purpose when you go and do a smaller role?
Absolutely. Because when you ask the character, not the performer, but the character, what this is about, and the answer is, well, it's about me, right? No matter how small that role is for that character, this is his or her life. And so if you're coming to tell everybody La Cena è pronta, you know, and this, you know, there's a person there and there's a story there. I mean, not to say that that's going to be like my next, you know, few years. It's like La Cena è pronta. What happened to Eric's career? No, but there are roles that are small, quote, that can be incredibly satisfying. But also, I was happy last fall to have done I Capuletti in San Francisco and Sharpless in LA, and then concerts with the Seattle Symphony. I was happy to be in one time zone,
Right, absolutely,
for the fall. And after a year and a half of just really, really kind of high pressure, under the microscope stuff, it was just glad that, you know, I was like, you know, yeah, sing it. You know, I was like, Joyce, hit it.
yeah.
That's right, what she said to the dress, you know, I had no problem with just sort of not having to be like, you know.
Yeah, and because certainly, just as you have to vary what you're doing vocally, in a way you have to vary what you do psychically, just to give yourself a break in the middle.
Sometimes you need sort of that little bit of a, you know, the paid vacation, you know, or because I'm the guy who's like, yeah, you know, my agent calls, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that too. Oh, I'll do that too. And then I'll get in the middle of it. I'm just like,
Yeah, then why did I say yes?
Yeah.
Do you experiment at all in small roles where you think, let me just try?
Oh, yeah. Like in the Capuletti, I threw in some high G. I threw in a high G at the end of the show where, you know, he's like, Uchizi da ki. I was like, Uchizi da ki. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that because I've been singing all night long. I'm feeling pretty fresh. And nobody cares. If it splats against the big back of the wall, no big deal. You know,
that's
I mean, yes, it's a big deal, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, oh, he's not a serious artist, is he? It's like, no, I can hear Twitter now. It's like, what the hell is
but I love the fact that, you know, if you're doing a smaller role, just watch for what you may do, because you just may be, you know, experimenting.
Or you have to try things out. And like I tried out. I sang the Count's aria from Figaro.
From Italy, yeah.
And I tried out that alternate version with all those high Gs. That's like sort of hard for baritones. I'm not even baritone, but I tried it out at this New Year's Eve thing where people were like halfway in the bag already. And you know, so they didn't, you know, people were drinking, they didn't care. So I'm like, I'm gonna try this out at this thing. You know, so the crowd was sort of, you know, they were like, no matter what you did, yay! You know, so you have to sort of know where to, you know.
When in your career did you move from really accepting any role that was offered to choosing thoughtfully about what roles you were to do?
I'm just starting to do that now. I'm starting to sort of, because being a freelancer, anything, you're always thinking, okay, is this the last gig? Is this the last one? And then when recitals come along, you know, I'm feeling that, and I'm sitting there trying to decide what the program's going to be, and it's just like, because you know this is the last recital you're ever going to do, so you need to do something that you really, and just to try to get that out of your mindset, it's hard. because we're always sort of needing to, because there's no job security in what we do. You know, we're not somewhere and then we get tenure and, you know, our job security is the casting directors and the general managers wanting to re-engage us. And so we're sort of always we're always auditioning.
Even when you're just performing.
Even when we're, because we're worried about the future. It's like actors, you know, it's like, you know, oh, if this movie doesn't make this amount of money, and then, you know, all of a sudden it's this decrescendo of, and so now I'm sort of allowing myself to be a little more picky and choosy, and also looking at my calendar and realizing I'm not Superman, and there needs to be a period of rest between this and that, and you know, because you're just like, oh, well, I got to fill it all up with work because you know, because I got bills and so.
What's the farthest engagement you have committed to?
2018.
2018. That's good. That's good. It's almost 10 years.
Yeah, right.
You mentioned recitals, and I wanted to talk about that. Last year, the year before, we had Stephanie Blythe for an interview. And Stephanie talked about the importance of a recital to train you to be what she said was an autonomous artist, where the costume designer isn't telling you what to wear, the stage director isn't telling you what to move.
You're your own artistic director.
The composer hasn't given you the score.
Right.
And in one of the Carnegie Hall YouTube interviews, you said, in choosing a recital program, it's like there's this huge amount of music you could choose from. You know, glum German, you know, wisty, French music. So do you find being a recitalist a really important part of your artistic life?
I do. I enjoy the intimacy of it, and being able to do that well is probably some of the most difficult performing we do. And being able to, you know, deliver a text and sort of do this with everybody, and to do it in a way it's not operatic. I mean, for me, when I do recitals, I want to do a recital, and so I end up really not putting any arias on there or anything. And one of the things, and this is maybe really counterintuitive, one of the things that's most exhausting about doing a recital is not having as much of a physical release of the emotions. And they sort of collect a little bit. And after recital, I mean, I'm more beat in 90 minutes or 2 hours than if I had, you know, done a performance of Parsifal, and it's just, there's something about it. And it's taken me a long time to get sort of good at it. I don't, it's one of those things where and ultimately, when you get out there, you just sort of have to let all of that go and just sort of bear yourself. And, you know, there's no costumes, there's no moat of an orchestra between you and you're just, it's just you and a pianist and whatever it is you're bringing to the evening. And it's something that I'll have a single program, and I will do, you know, sort of a tour of it, which is wonderful if that can happen. That from performance to performance, it's so different, and it varies. I mean, you're in one night you're in a hall that the acoustics are amazing, and then next night you're in a hall where the acoustics aren't really letting you know what's going on out there, and you're just sort of holding on Yeah, you know, and you're looking at your pianist and you're just sort of, you know, trying your best. And then there are nights where you're just sort of playing jazz.
Yeah.
You know, where you're just jamming.
Yeah.
Because everything is just sort of lined
Yeah.
up, the acoustics, it's a decent piano for your pianist. I mean, imagine if, you know, like if I had to go somewhere to sing and every time it was a different instrument. I mean, that's what pianists go through and they're having to figure it out. And so when all those things come together in this one instrument that's me and the pianist, it's great when it works and
it clearly develops your courage.
yeah, it takes because you know you could sort of rest on your laurels and like do 3 or 4 different roles every year all around the place and make a ton of money and just sort of and not sort of venture into something that's a little more challenging. And I just think if I'm going to keep growing as an artist, I just need to exercise this muscle as much as possible.
Which brings me to the question of new music, because you know, when you think about your really big, you know, breaks, the Grendel, Elliot Goldenthal, and Julie Taymor, and the Dr. Atomic, and in one of your interviews, they said that you did not want to be pigeonholed as Joe New Music, as Mr. New Music guy. But clearly, new music intersects all of your standard repertoire and your concert singing and your recital work. And is it, you have a great ability with new music, perfect pitch, ability to learn music? Does it just keep your brain active?
I wish I had perfect pitch. That'd make things a lot easier. No, I think it's exciting to be a part of the birth of something. And because all the pieces we sing now at one point were new music. And we take for granted that, oh yeah, this piece, this wonderful piece, it's always been beloved. And like, no, you know, the premiere of, you know, you think about Donizetti and Puccini and Stravinsky, and you think about, oh, well, of course, people just loved this stuff from the very beginning. And no, and so I think it's important to have new works just to keep the art form going and alive. And you know, I mean, what if things just stopped at Mozart? You know, I'm sure that would have made some people just thrilled and delighted. But, you know, we wouldn't have had Chopin, we wouldn't have had Strauss, we wouldn't have, I mean, just, and so, and they were considered, oh, what are you doing? You're rocking the boat, you know, with this new, with you kids with your new rock music.
So you enjoy the mix. You enjoy doing the standard repertoire, new works, stepping in and out.
Absolutely. And the whole Joe New Music thing was, I was afraid because for the longest time, I would sing, you know, I'd sing Bach, Handel, Monteverdi, Puccini, Mozart, and I wasn't labelable. And then I was afraid now that, okay, now we got a label for Eric. He's the new music, you know, and I just like, no, I'm. It's funny in voice. It's this strange sort of weird thing where you do all these types of different repertoire, but being a pianist, no, being a conductor, no, being, you know, and I think if you can do it, and you know, I'm not advocating somebody go out and do something vocally that's beyond them and that the orchestra's covering them up and hurt themselves, but if you can, you know, I think about Patricia Barton, who was in the Julius Caesar, and then, you know, as we're rehearsing The Ring, she was our Erda.
Yeah.
And so if you can do those things and people want to hire you.
One of the writers said that you have, you know, you and Stephanie Blythe are the two singers who just seem to have such an incredible breadth of repertoire and an ability to sing, whether it's cabaret or recital or Wagner or new music, and it's just, I think, what company to be keeping with Stephanie, who seems to be able to sing anything. I only have, one more question before I open it to questions from our audience here, and that is about, the question of fame. And I would suggest talking to you that fame hasn't changed you at all in terms of your core values and your integrity. But suddenly you are, the face of MedHD Transmissions, and you are an Opera News honoree, and from 20 years of work as a musician, suddenly you walk down the street, you walk down Broadway, and everyone knows who you are. How has it changed your life?
Well,
you were really clear in one interview saying, I'm not famous like famous, I'm opera world famous.
Well, and not even. I mean, because I wanted to go back and say, because when we walk down the street, I mean, maybe one person in 30 blocks will be like, hey, aren't you that? Yeah. But it's not the fame that's, that really famous
You're
people
not a
deal
Kardashian.
with. Yes, fame for its own sake. No, it's weird because I'm the same artist that I was before, and so it's. And I try not to get too wrapped up in it because it'll disappear as quickly as it comes. I mean, and so yes, I mean, it's a means to an end in a way that yes, the PR thing can help maybe you be engaged by people because they think that it might sell a few tickets, or it just it gives it sort of this event-like status, but and so and in a way it's kind of necessary to work with the caliber of people with whom you want to work, and so insofar as that goes, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But as far as adulation or anything, I'm just always concerned that whatever I'm presenting is deserving of any sort of applause and so it just. And so when it happened, when these series of events happened, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, I guess this has to be good now, doesn't it? You know, and so you sort of get a little nervous, and you become aware of in this era of social media and YouTube and people recording things without you knowing, and you become aware of that. When I was talking about everything you do is an audition, and singers get grief. I mean, for canceling and all that sort of thing. But in the back of their mind, because nobody wants to cancel, but you're thinking, okay, this is passable. But for the spotlight that they're shining on me now, that's not good enough. And so singers may think along those lines that, okay, well, I'd rather cancel than not do the job that they've become accustomed from me.
Right.
But that's a hard sort of thing to weigh, and so. You read where people are like, oh, so-and-so's a canceller, and, la, la, la. I mean, yeah, if you're sitting somewhere and you're playing hooky, that's not cool.
Right.
And if you have somebody who just sort of precipitously, that's not what I'm talking about. And so any time that I cancel, it's because vocally I can't fulfill my obligation. And it's not because, oh, I have a little sniffle, oh, when I canceled a performance at Goethe Dämmerung, I think it was last season, and I came to the house and I tried to warm up to see, because I had seen the doctor, and he said, well, and I was warming up, and my voice was just in shambles. I mean, just, one note from the next, just, and so I'm standing there, and I got there a couple of hours early to just sort of assess it. And there's a way you can go about it without, okay, if you're going to cancel, do it. Find out as soon as possible. And so I went there. I was, I think, 90 minutes before the show, and I was warming up. I'm like, okay, you have to get Richard in here so he has a chance to warm up properly and not be like running at the last minute. And then sometimes you choose to go on and things sort of don't work out, and then you have to pull out. But I don't think an artist ever, and it's funny because you didn't bring this up, I brought this up, but I don't think the serious artists, they don't do that whimsically. Yeah. It's something that's, and then I'm thinking, and then the business part of me, it's like, it's 8 minutes, go get your check. But I wasn't met worthy. Yeah.
You weren't worthy.
Right. I wasn't worthy of that 8 minutes of glorious music that Wagner had written. And so there was no way I could do it. I could have sort of coughed and Rex Harrison my way through it, but I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, first of all, just what a wonderful statement of integrity. And secondly, I know that anytime you got on stage that I've heard you, all the ovation that comes is completely deserved. So never a question about that. But I'd like to see if there are any questions for Eric here in the audience. Yes, in the front row. And we have a microphone here so that it picks up on the live stream.
I have 2 questions. One can be answered in a word, and the other one I think will take a little more time. The first is, when are you going to sing Philip? And the second is, you have really phenomenal diction in every language. And I think a lot of people think, oh, everything has surtitles now, we don't need diction anymore. And of course, I think for that reason you need diction more than ever. But I want to know if that came naturally to you or if you've had to work on it, particularly in other languages, and how important, how you did it and how important you think it is.
Okay, for the first question, yes, Philip is on the docket in, I think it's in 15, 16, somewhere, won't tell you where, because one has to allow a company to announce its own repertoire plans. It's just, some people I see on the websites, well, in 2017, I'm just like, no.
Well, if you're doing
people
Philip in
that.
15, 16, I'm going to buy airline stock in 14, 15, because everyone's going to fly to see it.
Oh, and
The diction question.
The diction is something I'm constantly working on, because I think it's really important, even if there are titles, that integrity thing, that being a character. So you're a character that speaks this language, although sometimes you're not in the country of that language. Bohemians in Paris speaking Italian, or a Japanese woman in Tokyo speaking Italian.
Right.
But I think no matter what language it is, I have to act as if everyone out there is a native speaker, and because that's our communication along with the music. I mean, if not, then I might as well start playing an instrument. The text is is where it all starts, you know, where the music comes from. And as Maestro Luisi was saying the other day in a note session that during the Wagner, that emphasize the text because the text itself is already its kind of music. And that really stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, you know, that's sort of, that Wagner was the librettist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so, the music and the text are just so intertwined.
Yeah. Another question. In the second row.
Hello. I guess what I'd like to know is what would be your advice for singers who are making the transition from being a student to pre-professional, early professional stage? What would you say would be the best thing to do and or things to do with regard to professionalism and, what would be another one? Professionalism and making the best of the opportunities in terms of repertoire choices, particularly?
Yeah, bridging that gap from student to professional. It's nowadays we have these young artist programs, and I think these programs are what going to Europe used to be as far as career. And if you can audition and be a part of one of those season-long apprentice program, I think it's an invaluable, it's just, there's that safety of you're performing yet still learning, and you're in this operatic, this company environment where you can learn what to do and what not to do, you know, by watching colleagues whom you respect. And that's where it's sort of the minor leagues, you know, the farm, where people go. Where this is where the agents go to find, you know,
And the opera company general
the opera,
directors.
the general directors, and while you're there, you're on. And when I mean on, it's your work ethic, your being on time to rehearsal, your preparedness. People are watching, and other people are calling to ask about young artists. It's like, well, okay, I heard so-and-so in audition, sings well, what's he or she like? You know, are they a pain in the butt? Are they someone who learns, you know, or they come prepared? And if not that route, I mean, people still go to Europe, and there's wonderful training to be had still. There are fests, contracts still. I mean, you know, the economy's going through, over there especially, is going through a little bit of a hard time, but I know Americans who still go there, and especially bigger voices that are bigger, younger, and you know that. And so instead of waiting around to the point where you're like, okay, am I past it? People don't want to, I can't sing this repertoire now, but there is repertoire that you can sing that's not really, that isn't done that much in this country. Right. And so you can go over there. I know a few dramatic voices who have gone to Germany especially, and to Switzerland, and they've been allowed to do
Freischütz.
Exactly, which hasn't been done. I mean, when's the last time Freischütz has been done in this country? I mean, it's been a while.
For young big voice
for
singers,
young, you know, Agatha would be, you know, and I find that they're over there. They're willing to take a chance more so than here. It's especially on a young, big voice. Nobody wants to be the person, you wrecked so-and-so by letting them sing.
I saw another question. Well, this will be the last one we take.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Somewhat along a similar vein, I was wondering, I had a singer tell me this week, I never got a part from auditioning. I got other parts from auditioning. I would do this audition, and then it would lead into something else. And I wondered if that was true for you when you were you know, a young artist transitioning into full artist. Where did you get your jobs?
Most of the work came from auditioning, and but the best work, I think the best situation, if someone comes and sees you in a performance, I think that's more telling of what you're capable of than, you know, than you rush somewhere. And I lived in Philadelphia and get on the train and come up here and, okay, the train was late and I'm running and like, oh man, I haven't warmed up. Oh, is there a warm-up space? No, you know, and then you sort of get there, it's like, okay, sing for 10 minutes and show me what you got. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's hard. And it's, you have to learn how to become a good audition taker, I guess. And people hate it. And some careers are made without it. You know, some careers are made when you sing somewhere, even in a small venue, or you're singing a small role, you know, next to somebody mm-hmm. who's, you know, a star, and then the people come to hear, and then they hear you sing your small role, and then they're like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, the whole auditioning circuit, it's really difficult, and it can be just really, you have to put your armor on, and you have to go and audition and forget about it and move on, and not sort of like, oh, how did that audition go? Oh, how did that audition go? Or am I gonna get, you sort of have to go and just go on to the next one, and if something happens, you're like, oh, it's a pleasant surprise. Mm-hmm. You know, if you just sort of put every emotional ounce of just in every single audition, thinking, okay, you know, God, I hope I get it, you know, kind of a thing. It can wear you down, and so. I think the most successful auditions I've ever done is where I just went out there and just sang for the joy of singing. And that comes across, and that sort of just frees you. But also know this, no matter if you're singing in a performance or an audition, the people out there, they're wanting you to do well. And I think you can take that energy from them. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, you know,
they want to be knocked out of their chair. They
want to be blown away, and they're rooting for you. Mm-hmm. You know, especially if you're the last audition of like 30 all day long, and they're like, "Come on, give me somebody."
Absolutely, it's absolutely true.
You know,
absolutely true.
So, yeah. But it's a necessary evil, and you just sort of have to learn to have it not be as big of a deal, and I think, you know, those times I was most successful and especially if I just sort of forgot about it, and then, you know, the phone rings and you're like,
Well, your success at it is our good fortune. I thank you so much for letting us take this time in your schedule. I know that we have some cookies and wine and a couple little snacks out in the lobby, and that Eric will be out there to say hello to you, and if you have some other questions, you can chat with him. But for all that you're doing for opera, for us as a colleague, I thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Eric Owens. Thank you, Joe.